There's a moment where you already know. You know it's not working. You know it doesn't feel right. You know something inside you is tired. And yet, you still want them. Not just a little, but enough to stay, enough to think about them, enough to go back, even after everything. And that's the part no one explains properly. Why does something that hurts still feel so hard to leave? At first, it doesn't feel like a problem. It feels like connection, moments that feel intense, meaningful, different. You feel seen. You feel pulled in. You feel something strong. And your brain labels that as this matters. But over time, the experience becomes inconsistent. Sometimes it feels good, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you feel close, while it's sometimes distant. And that inconsistency creates something powerful. Not clarity, but attachment. Because the brain doesn't just attach to what feels good, it attaches to what feels unpredictable. If this feels a little too familiar, that's not random. It means you're starting to notice something most people ignore. And once you begin to see it clearly, you don't experience things the same way again. So, if you want to understand these patterns deeper, stay here. Subscribe. Because the hardest part isn't leaving, it's seeing clearly enough to know why you stayed. Think about it. If something is always good, you relax. If something is always bad, you leave. But when something is both, you stay. Because your mind keeps trying to solve it. Maybe it'll go back to how it was. Maybe I just need to understand it better. Maybe I'm the one who needs to adjust. And that maybe becomes the hook. Not because you're weak, but because your brain is trying to make sense of mixed signals. Now something else happens. You start investing, not just time, but emotion, effort, patience, understanding. The more you invest, the harder it becomes to step away. Because walking away now feels like losing everything you've already put in, even if what you're holding on to isn't consistent anymore. Sometimes, what pulls you back isn't just the person, it's the feeling. A feeling that might be familiar, not necessarily comfortable, but known. The ups and downs, the uncertainty, and the emotional intensity. And your brain recognizes it, even if it doesn't feel good. Because familiarity can feel safer than the unknown. This is where things split. One part of you says, this isn't right. Another part says, but what if it changes? And those two voices create tension, logic versus feeling, clarity versus hope. And when that tension exists, you don't move forward, you stay in between. What keeps the cycle going is not just the person, it's the pattern. Moments of closeness, followed by distance, moments of warmth, followed by confusion, and each time it returns to good, it reinforces the attachment because your brain remembers the relief. No, not just the discomfort. This is the part that's hardest to accept. Just because something feels intense doesn't always mean it's stable. Intensity can feel like connection, but they're not the same thing. One is consistent, the other fluctuates. And when intensity becomes the signal you follow, you stay attached to the highs, even if the lows cost you more. So, what changes? Not instantly, not dramatically, but gradually. You begin to notice the pattern instead of just the moments. You see the cycle, you feel the repetition, and with that awareness comes a different kind of clarity, not forced, but steady. You start asking, does this feel consistent? Does this feel balanced? Does this feel stable over time? Because the question was never, why do I want them? The deeper question is, what am I responding to? That keeps pulling me back. And once you see that clearly, the feeling doesn't disappear overnight, but it changes because awareness doesn't force you to leave. It simply shows you what you're actually holding on to. And this is where it goes deeper because what you're feeling isn't just emotional, it's neurological. Your brain is constantly trying to learn from experience, not in big, obvious ways, but through patterns. When something gives you a strong emotional reaction, your brain pays attention, especially when that reaction is inconsistent. Good, then bad. Close, then distant. Warm, then cold. None of that pattern does something specific. It keeps your attention locked in because your brain starts trying to predict it. There's something called a reward pattern. When a positive experience is predictable, your brain relaxes. But when it's unpredictable, your brain stays alert. It keeps looking for the next good moment. When will it come back? What do I need to do? And that search becomes the attachment. Now, something else happens. The contrast between the highs and the lows starts to feel stronger. The good feels really good. The distance feels heavier. And your brain begins to associate relief with connection, not just happiness, but relief from the discomfort. And this creates a kind of internal conflict because part of you sees the problem and another part keeps justifying it. It's not always like this. They didn't mean it. Maybe I just need to understand them better. And those thoughts help reduce the discomfort, but they also keep the pattern going. Your brain doesn't store every moment equally. It prioritizes certain experiences, the most intense ones, the most emotional ones. So, even if there were many difficult moments, a few strong positive ones can stand out more. And those are the ones your mind returns to. After a while, this stops being just about the other person. It becomes part of how you see yourself. You become someone who tries to understand, tries to fix, say, tries to make it work, and letting go starts to feel like losing part of that identity. There's one more layer, the feeling that it's almost what you want. Not completely right, but not completely wrong either. Almost enough, almost consistent. And almost is one of the hardest things to walk away from because it keeps the possibility alive. So, what changes? Not the feeling right away, but your perspective on it. Instead of asking, why do I still want this? You start asking, what pattern is creating this feeling? What keeps repeating? What keeps pulling me back? Because once you see the pattern clearly, the feeling doesn't control you the same way. Not because it disappears, but because you finally understand what's been driving it all along. And maybe That's the part that changes everything, not the feeling, but how you understand it. Because for a long time, it didn't feel like a pattern. It felt like something real, something meaningful, something worth holding on to. And maybe parts of it were, but not in the way you thought. Because what you were holding on to wasn't just the person, it was the feeling, the moments, the possibility of what it could be, the version that felt right, the version that felt close. Even if it didn't stay that way, and that doesn't make you weak, it means you felt something strongly. It means you stayed connected to something that mattered to you. But there's a difference between something that feels strong and something that stays steady. And when you begin to see that difference, something shifts. Not suddenly, not perfectly, but quietly. You pause a little more. You question a little deeper. And slowly, the pull doesn't feel the same. Not because you stopped caring, but because you started seeing clearly. And once you see it clearly, you don't feel it the same way again. See you next tomorrow.